Is there anyone here who would have a problem with us doing that? Okay. All right. Thank you very much. So obviously, welcome. Glad you're here. We want to make sure that this is as collaborative of an interaction as possible. But one of the first things we're going to do is share with you just a short video. A lot of you probably have seen it already, but just to kind of get the conversation started. But before we do that, I want you all to think about the kinds of topics you would like to discuss. You can put it in the chat, or you can bring it up when we finish with the video. Probably easier if you can put it in the chat. But if there's a topic you want us to discuss, broadly, please put that in there. We'll have some time for questions and answers as well, and make sure that we can give as much attention as possible to each of the topics that people have come here hoping to talk about and hear about, what I would do as chair to try to address your concerns or aspirations for the party. So do think about that, put it in the chat. Lydia, if you want to go ahead with the video. Oh, Zoom.
My name is John Harris. I'm running to be your chair of the Democratic Party of Oregon. When you first decided to dedicate your time and energy in the Democratic Party, what was the reason? Did you see a wrong that needed to be put right? Was it something that happened to you? Or did you watch the struggles of your loved ones and the people you care about? Or maybe it was seeing an injustice happen to someone you don't even know. Because we care, we had to move, get active, create change. In politics, though, we can lose sight of what matters most, the people and processes that drive real change. Every single one of us, our perspectives, our contributions, our lived experiences, our political goals are valuable, but we don't all feel valued. Despite our successes, our party's future is at risk. We may be successful in the Metro and the Willamette Valley, but there's a Republican Party ready and willing to challenge us all over Oregon. Those of us in red and swing districts already know this, and that's why they need our help and our resources. That's why I'm running to be your chair of the Democratic Party of Oregon. We need a systemic change, one that will empower us all to create together, nurture community, and actively promote equitable, participatory inclusion so that we all feel and are valued. We can come together as an SEC community to implement an equity-centered, collaborative approach to advance the legislative and electoral victories that we need to uplift and support every Oregonian. Over the coming weeks, I will continue calling delegates and Democrats across the state to learn more about your local needs and what you envision for the party's future. We will share more videos like this one to elaborate on how we can build this infrastructure, to share resources and foster relationships. Until then, I wish you kindness, safety, and good health wherever you may go. My name is John Harris Knight, the collaborative candidate for chair of the Democratic Party of Oregon.
All right, thanks, Lydia. Through a lot of volunteer help, we got that together. I was really, glad to be able to do that kind of a thing. I think that it'd be really neat to see, videos and perspectives from people around the state within the party, and share messages with each other and in innovative ways like that. But that's something down the line that we have to work ourselves toward. Right now, though, I would, after that video and after having some time to think, what are some topics that you all want to discuss? And feel free to raise your hand if that's easy for you to do with the Zoom. Use the raise your hand function. If that's challenging, you can either raise your real hand, or if you're on the phone or something like that, then we can find another way to chime in if you want to unmute and that kind of thing. But
John, there is a question in the chat that I think is really good, which is Catherine asks, I've been frustrated by the lack of adherence to Robert's Rules of Order during meetings. How well versed are you about parliamentary procedures?
That's a great question. Honestly, I think there have been a lot of people who've been frustrated in differing directions, right? Some people say we adhere to parliamentary procedure and Robert's rules too much to an oppressive degree, and to others feel like if we don't follow those rules, we're running the risk of people being disenfranchised or frustrated or not being able to track what we're doing. There's always room to grow in terms of learning about Robert's rules and all the various details and potentialities there. I'm fairly decent with it when it comes to the basics of meetings and running your conventional meeting, especially something like at the SEC. But my intention is to go through refresher courses. As soon as I'm elected, go ahead and sign up for course after course, so that by the time we get to the second quarterly meeting, not only do I feel comfortable, but I want to make sure that the rest of you feel like you've got a chair who really understands those kinds of things. I'm a rules-oriented guy. I think through rules a lot. As a kid playing pickup football across the street, we had the NFL rule book. My brother and I brought the NFL rule book to follow. We played by every single rule in that rule book as best as we could playing pickup football. So my mind goes there pretty easily. And so what I don't know, I intend to learn. But also, I think it's really important for us as a party to really help train up all of the people in positions of leadership, whether it's our SEC officers or chairs and vice chairs of standing committees, caucus chairs and vice chairs, as well as at the county party level, providing more of those trainings and resources so they can have effective meetings. I know that, in some cases, reorgs for caucuses or CDs have been a challenge. And I want to set people up to succeed. I want to make sure that we provide them the resources and tools they need, not just resort to pointing fingers and saying you didn't do a good job, but really work to actually improve people's skills. So I'll do the same thing for myself, constantly learning, constantly trying to work on those kinds of skills. That's a great question, Catherine. Let's see, Ruth. Oh, Mark. Let me go with Mark real quick. I think I saw your hand up earlier. Go ahead, Mark.
First, a general question. Are you related at all to Phil Knight?
As far as I know, not at all. I'm originally from Tennessee, and the Knight side of my family was from Alabama and Georgia. So
Okay.
as far as I know, no relation, even distantly.
Well, yeah. You know who he is, right?
Oh, absolutely. I'm a distance runner.
Okay.
I know how that all started. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I knew about Coos Bay, Marshfield High, and Steve Prefontaine long before I moved to Oregon.
Well, I'm in Umatilla County, part of Congressional District 2. And the feeling out here is sort of felt left out, especially during congressional elections. And we were stuck with Greg Walden here for 20 years. Now we have Cliff Bentz, and the level of systemic poverty here is only increased through the years, even though we've been promised something different. I guess my question is, especially when it comes around to hopefully replacing Cliff Bentz, what ideas do you have maybe for helping us to recruit viable candidates and giving us some not just financial assistance, but direction on how to turn a very red area, at least purple?
Yeah, a lot of great questions kind of embedded in that, the idea about systemic poverty and the communities that are affected by that. Also talking about, support for whether it's county parties or trying to do work across the whole district. And how do we organize to set ourselves up for success in those kinds of races? And, I think it's, obviously it's not just CD2, congressional race, but it's all those smaller races that, the whole idea of building a bench. So great questions. A lot of proposals that I've worked, ideas that I've gotten from conversations with folks in like Union County and Klamath and Jefferson County and all over CD2. And one of the big things is that feeling of being left out. Some of it has to do with funding. There's this question about whether or not the DPO provides funding to support county parties and whether or not we should do that. I think there's totally space for us to figure out how to listen to Democrats in rural areas, how to get that feedback about what they want and what they need, and then really structure the work we do as a party to accommodate and try to support that. Whether it's funding, whether it's IT support, whether it's work on communications. In Wilsonville in the Valley, there was concern that a candidate was going to get overrun by her Republican challenger back in August. And one of the people working in that county, one of the PCPs, brought in a former Facebook exec to set up a social media campaign. And that incumbent, that Democratic incumbent, won satisfyingly. When we're talking about reaching communities in Central and Eastern Oregon and the rest of CD2, there are a lot of communities that it's hard for us to reach farther apart there, with poverty and with communities, whether it's tribal nations or immigrant communities. It's hard to, maybe connect with them the way we'd like to really build those kinds of relationships. So working with our caucuses, whether it's rural caucus, Native American caucus, Latino caucus, working with our county parties to really build some more collaboration across these different structures within the party to try to, build a program out to try to make these connections with community. On top of that, you're talking about candidates, you're talking about winning elections and getting results either at the legislature or in Congress. We're talking about providing real support for candidates. I've talked to people, often they're chairs or vice chairs of their county parties who've run for county commissioner and run for school board and run for things like that. And they found out after their election was over that there were resources that they knew nothing about and had never been told about. But it was always presented like, well, why didn't you use this resource from the DPO? And they had no idea. And so some of that's communication. We have staff who are working on things like the local election project. But again, when we don't know where we're prioritizing or why, it doesn't facilitate that idea that we're included if we aren't receiving that kind of support. So what I want to do is engage in a lot more communication, from the DPO staff and from the officers, as well as facilitating collaboration across county party lines. If you're trying to organize CD2, all those county parties need to be a part of that conversation. So connecting the CD2 committee and the counties that are involved in CD2. But one of the proposals I have is to convene a special committee specifically to develop recommendations for how we better serve rural communities and smaller communities, like smaller towns, not just in CD2, but in other parts of the state that need us to push back against timber unity, the Republican Party dominance in those areas. And I don't, there's a phrase I've heard, I guess, left for red. We don't want to leave, spaces just be dominated like that, because we have students who need the support in their school districts. We have communities that are traditionally and historically systematically pushed out of the political process. And if we're going to be the party that supports all of the people, then we need to go to the places, not just where it's easy, that are blue districts or swing districts, but where it's hard, where the Republicans have put the time in to push back from what used to be 5% difference between Republicans and Democrats in CD2. Now it's 30%. Doesn't mean we can't push back on that and try to change that number. Any other follow-up on that, Mark?
No, I think you answered my question. I like the idea of collaboration, and you're right. We need to work more on trying to elect Democrats locally, but in our area, believe me, we've tried hard running who we thought were good people. We just got hammered. mean, it gets, for membership, it gets depressing. And after a while, I think, why, why even try, unfortunately. We keep on trying to fight the battle.
Right. Yeah, I can understand how frustrating it must be. I grew up in Tennessee. I rarely even had a candidate to vote for, or to aspire to vote for when I was, younger. And one of the things that, I live in Multnomah County. We've got some Multnomah County folks on this in this Zoom here, and I've heard over and over again people wanting to find a way to help CD2 rural counties, rural communities to really help whether it's, like I said, whether it's volunteer time, communications, IT support, helping with campaigns. But the problem is there's not a facilitated systemic way for providing that kind of support. And so they're trying to make phone calls, but they don't all have phone numbers for everybody. And so they're trying to build relationships. And as chair, one of the things I want to do is facilitate that. I see the chair as a facilitator role more than anything. And so bringing those groups together, making sure that those are led by the communities and the counties that need the support. And it's not like it's not like the perspective of Multnomah County and the metro comes in and says, oh, this is how you run a campaign. Working together. There are plenty of candidates who've tried, either succeeded or run tough campaigns and have learned things. We can put those ideas together. I've heard the suggestion that we actually create like a mentor program for candidates, especially in CD2. We can't always have a great candidate every time because it just depends on who wants to run. But we can do that short, medium, and long-term work to build up that bench while we're also looking for somebody to try to replace Cliff Bentz in 2 years.
Right. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you, Mark. It's a deep question, and I've heard it a lot. Let's see. Catherine Stearns, Ruth. Ruth says, what, if anything, can we, as the DPO, do structurally to prevent Republicans from walking off the job to preclude having a quorum? I'm not super familiar. I'll admit what I know and what I don't know. I'm not super familiar with exact rules of the Senate and all of that and how to work around that, other than winning more seats. We lost a couple of seats on the coast. Seats that we had that were potentially winnable. A lot of lessons to learn there about how we could better support, those communities, in terms of candidate recruitment on up to the general election. So that's the first easy answer. But there are also questions about trying to change the law. Other states don't have this problem because they have different rules and that kind of thing within their House and Senate that prevent that kind of walkout. So there are people who are more knowledgeable about that than me, and so I would try to turn to them to see what we can strategize on there. I see Catherine Stearns. Are you familiar with the rural organizing project? I am. I do know of them. If yes, do you plan to seek their endorsement? Interesting question. Similar question came up last night, whether I would seek an endorsement from another organization. And I kind of put it this way. We often get unions to endorse our candidates, right? But this is an internal election for an organization, for our party. And I think that unions would be pretty perturbed if we as a state party went to a union and endorsed a specific candidate or candidates to be their leadership. Similarly, I think there's an ethical question about trying to encourage other organizations to influence the outcome of our officer elections, and that would include other state parties too. I have friends, for example, in Washington, Democrats. Could I possibly get an endorsement there? Probably not. Probably because they wouldn't do that kind of thing. But I do think that we should focus on people who are members of the Oregon Democrats, people who are Oregon Democrats as much as possible. Since it's an internal election, but I do appreciate the work that Rural Organizing Project has been doing for a long time. Also a question from Catherine. Next thing is, what do you see as the role DPO staff has in the party as compared to members? The members in this sense, I think you mean like the delegates to the SEC. those delegates are the governing board, right? Those of us who've been involved in nonprofits, I've been an executive director of a nonprofit and been subject to the, direction of a board. Had to work well with them to get things done. I've also been the board member, a treasurer of a board, as well as president of an environmental nonprofit and reelected. And so those, the relationship between a board and staff, it needs to be something that needs to be handled carefully. It's we're fiscally responsible or ultimately responsible for the party, but we do entrust the staff with carrying out the tasks that are on their job descriptions that are part of the plan for the organization. I think that one of the things that I'm encouraging us to do is develop a short, medium, and long-term equity-centered strategic plan, maybe looking at 2, 4, 8 years. And for that to be a strong plan, for example, we can't just do it ourselves as an SEC. We need to incorporate staff so we understand the pieces that they're dealing with and that they've put together as staff, as well as the work that is being done in caucuses and the county levels and the congressional district committees, so that we can actually have a robust plan. So a lot of the work we do needs to be done in coordination with the board, with the staff. Our board needs to coordinate with them. There are also, elements of Robert's rules and parliamentary procedure with regard to participation in meetings from staff. It depends on the rules of the bylaws that we have, but my understanding is that if somebody is not a member of a committee, whether it's somebody who's in a caucus but not an SEC delegate, we have to actually approve them to speak to the group. Which I think if there's something that's important that needs to be heard, we can go through that process. But it's one of the things where, as an organization, as a body, as a committee, the State Central Committee needs to understand that we need to be responsible for the information that we're bringing to each other in those business meetings, and that if there's additional information that needs to come from staff, that we make sure we get the approval and permission of the whole body, to make that happen. So I think I touched on that question. If there's anything more about that, please feel free to shoot something off in the chat. Definitely want to see good collaboration between board and staff. And I've done that kind of work in boards before, where there are a lot of blurred lines about responsibilities, and setting good standards, and making sure we know our role and we don't try to interfere with things that the staff are in charge of. And the same thing in the other direction, making sure that they know we've got it, and not feeling like they have to stress that we're gonna drop the ball, that they've worked so hard to keep juggling for us. Let's see. Yvette says, what kind of strategy would you implement to create unity within the party? Great. I'm in Tillamook County, and the opinions of the progressives and the moderates vary widely. There is a distinct feeling of animosity in the room. It makes it difficult to want to continue to participate on any level. I think a lot of us have felt that. I think part of the challenge, that we face in these business meetings is this kind of division and factionalization. I think it's important to name it, not to name it in a way that says it's your fault or their fault or my fault. We're all responsible for what is happening in these meetings, and we're at least responsible, all of us, for the solution. One of the big proposals I have, that the thread that runs through everything I'm talking about, is collaboration and making sure it's equity centered and community focused. So how do we do that? How do we foster relationships, build community in the SEC, and how do we make sure that as we do that, we're creating an environment that's welcoming to all the diverse communities, identities, perspectives, regions, making sure we're bridging every divide that we can imagine, whether it's urban or rural, the feeling that we're focusing on the metro, questions about whether this is an accommodating and welcoming space for, BIPOC members of the Oregon community. So first thing I would like to do, and this is something as chair that is one of the few, at least bylaw related unilateral actions that the chair can take, because the chair is typically a spokesperson and a facilitator for the meetings and the work that we do. But the one thing that the chair gets to do is one of the first things that happens is appointing the chair, the vice chair, and additional delegates to all the 5 standing committees. And one of the things that's so great about that is that, I've already got criteria. It's on the website. Some basic criteria that to be clear about what I would be looking for. But more importantly, I would work with, the other officers to maybe set up almost like a hiring committee. So it's not just me trying to make decisions on diversity within those appointments, as well as to solicit, real input from across the SEC, from the county CCs, from the caucuses, as well as from the members of those standing committees to provide suggestions and to nominate people, and also to make it clear that anyone who wants to fill those roles is free to submit their name. I want to make sure people know that we want their participation at those levels, and we want to facilitate training up new leaders. I'm not going to be picking people from my own side or somebody else's side, or people who agree with me or people who I happen to know. That's why I want to get all that input from people all over the state, because I don't know everybody, and none of us do. And so really doing the work to have multiple perspectives represented there, that's a big start. The next thing is I want to try to apply that collaborative approach, that equity center collaborative approach, in the work we do in the standing committees. A lot of the time we get to those business meetings, and it's the first time that people have been able to formally contribute input, feedback, try to get their perspective included. How many times have we heard somebody say, well, have you submitted this to the Black Caucus for their consideration? Or what about the Disability Caucus? Is this rules change going to make something less accessible? All those kinds of things, create, gridlock and frustration at the business meetings at the SEC level, but we can accomplish more collaboration at the drafting phase. As soon as something is written up and submitted to those standing committees, provide a period of time, whatever makes sense, a couple weeks or something, and make sure that that document is available to all of the members of that standing committee. And it's not always the case, right? Make sure they all get to see it. Make sure every delegate and alternate gets to see it. Make sure the caucuses get to see it. Right now, the bylaws just say the chair and the vice chair. So, make sure that, they pass it along and really get, have some time, not just a week like it says right now. Have some time to get input from the rest of the caucus and also the county parties, so that they can put their regional lens on it. That way we'll have more buy-in, more confidence in what people are seeing. They'll feel comfortable that they're not getting surprised by something that's made its way out of rules or budget committee or platform and resolutions committee or anything else, or out of a special committee. Really making sure that it's not all the work we do really says, we don't want to just hear your opinion. We want to try to consider a way to include it and account for it in the work we produce. I'm a big fan of trying to find mutually agreeable, mutually beneficial solutions. I've done that kind of work in various capacities, but if we can do that, we can start bridging these gaps. We can show people that they all, make sure they all feel and are valued, not just their perspectives, but them as people. And if you can start doing that, then it'll start breaking down some of these divisions, I think. That's a huge question. And I feel like I could talk about that for an hour by itself. So I'm sorry if I went on a little too long, but it's a big one. It's a big one that I've heard a lot. And then let's see, Yvette also answered, would you support an effort to recall the Republican candidates one by one for not showing up? That's an interesting approach. They've tried the recall Governor Brown effort. It's one of the interesting things about that I've heard is that it's an ingenious way to actually collect non-affiliated voter information from people who maybe aren't registered Republicans but don't like Kate Brown. They fill out these petitions. I think something like that, whether or not it turned into a result for these Republican senators, for example. I think this is what you're talking about, the walkout. Correct me if I'm misreading it, but finding a way to take that and make that be something we can get information. We're always talking about how do we reach non-affiliated voters, and the non-affiliated voters in the metro and the valley are typically a different proportion and mix than in rural parts of the state. And so it can really give us a little bit more concrete information, especially in those districts that are more Republican dominated. So I think that'd be a great thing to try. I think there are people who are talking about doing it, and whether or not it's something that the party takes on is really up to the SEC. But I would be happy to see that kind of a plan hatched and turned into something concrete and actionable. Let's see. I see Christian Ivana's question. It says, our revolution or DSA. I think I was touching on that question before about outside organizations. Again, if an organization wants to endorse and say something, I'm not going to say, please don't say what you want to say. But I'm not going to like actively pursue endorsements from everybody. I think that, if a group wants to share their opinion, I think that's totally fine. Let's see, Joel. One of the things that's happening is that I'm talking a lot. I'm not hearing your own voices. I know you're putting things in the chat.
Do you want me to ask it out
Yeah, I'd
loud,
like to
John?
hear other
Just so
people's
you
voices.
can
I
hear
feel like I'm
somebody's
talking a
voice
lot.
besides yours, John. I know the feeling. All right, I'll do it. And if I put it in there while you were talking to one of the previous questions, I said I love this idea of the equity-centered collaborative approach. It's a lot of things that I like. Centering an approach, kidding, equity and collaboration. And as somebody else mentioned, the person from Tillamook County, there's such a wide variety of beliefs and points of view inside of the party, and it can be quite conflicting. You've mentioned that you're a facilitator, so I'm asking the hard question of how does that look when you're in this leadership role? And does it mean you'd work for candidates and issues that are in opposition to your own personal values, if it's, for instance, in the will of a county party to do so? Or if the platform committee passes something that is against your values?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, there's definitely a difference between just being a member of the party and advocating for a certain direction versus being the elected representative for the entire party for the state. And so I think that the role there, again, is facilitator. It's in my list of proposals as well to say, I will never try to put my finger on the scale. I will never try to influence the outcome of a vote within the party, whether it's over a resolution or a bylaws or rules change or an internal election or a primary, because as the chair, my role would be to facilitate all of the decision making that you all get to make at every level, right? And not to unduly influence those outcomes. I think that you can't be collaborative. You can't facilitate a collaborative approach if you're picking sides, whether it's a person or an issue. And I think that one of the main things that we have to keep in mind is that as the chair, and the representative of the SEC, if the SEC passes something, then that's the role I'm in. Obviously I'm not going to go work for a campaign or knock on doors for a campaign in the middle of a primary because I support that candidate. There are people who I've supported, already, who are on the run up for their primary elections. I'll stop doing that as chair. I won't even donate to a campaign that up to that point if I'm chair, because until we've made a decision as a party, I don't want to put any undue influence on that. And if the party makes a decision, that's the route that as chair I'll support. Does that answer?
That's an interesting thing. That's a little different, and
Okay.
It raises a second question, which is so my question was about county stuff, particularly if Coos County runs a candidate that you have an issue with or supports an issue that you have an issue with, will you still enthusiastically support that? But if you answer that, the follow-up thing, which is what you just I think spoke to, is that I'm a Multi-Dem, and my understanding is that with resources and with just sheer numbers, Multnomah County has a really powerful voting bloc. However, our voting bloc is very progressive and blue, and so we can move the DPO with our block a certain direction, which can alienate people in, say, Mark Peterson's districts with what we're doing. And the chair is a person who is, in my view, thinking about the how to grow the party, expand into, like you're talking about, purple districts and grow our effectiveness in red districts. So what's your strategy in this equity-centered and collaborative approach to trying to be able to strategically empower those who are actually politically disempowered inside of the party, like Mark Peterson here?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And it kind of touches on the next question on the chat as well. Christian inputs about what is your plan to help clear up the divide between the more progressive wing and of the DPO and the more establishment wing, or how, and those terms, are tricky terms, right? They get thrown around easily, but at the same time, people don't always, self-identify that way. I know, Joel, you and I have talked about, how do people self-identify? Would they consider themselves to be this way, right? And I think that's an important point, because if we say we're going to try to help our rural communities or counties that need our support, if you're centering equity, you're centering it on what their needs are there, and it's not just who happens to be chair or vice chair of those county parties. It's also really trying to connect with the communities that live there. If you're in Jefferson County and you have constituents who are in Warm Springs, you need to be able to attend to their needs. You need to go, bring their voices in as best as we can, and that's we know that's a challenge. Same thing with immigrant communities or people who are non-citizens who are in our counties. We need to try to incorporate their voices, and so all of that kind of works together. And again, like Joel was saying earlier, with politics, and the same thing with centering equity, it may not exactly be a destination, but it's that constant striving. And so, same thing is true with any perceived or real division in the party, whether it's regional or ideological, or the fact that we just come from different lived experiences. The key is to get those people together, collaborate, come up with those decisions together, really facilitate those kinds of conversations. And that's not just going to be me, that's going to be making sure that we're helping train people to be better facilitators of collaboration, and to understand that their role isn't to push the direction of a conversation, but to help people reach those conclusions. So getting people in the same room, getting people to have a conversation with each other, especially if we disagree. I think that's we should recognize that the best results usually come out of difference of opinion, even polarization sometimes, but it's if we facilitate getting those ideas together. I was able to get legislative action item number 11 together, which specifically was a result of this kind of frustration between labor and environmental advocates around Coos Bay and the pipeline in Jordan Cove. Specifically brought both of those groups together. We came up with a mutually agreeable solution. It's legislative action item number 11 in our in our documentation for the platform right now. And so that's the kind of mindset I have. And again, not just me, trying to get everybody to do that. So let's see. I see Jaden's hand up. Go ahead, Jaden.
Hello. I have a little short monologue of ideas that I'm about to say. I'm not sure if there's a question in that, but you can just give me whatever reflections you get out of whatever I'm about to say. Okay. So yeah, I live in a rural county, and the subject matter I'm about to kind of just talk about is a lot deeper than just the Oregon DPO. It's kind of like the operating philosophy of our country as a whole, that being that of neoliberalism, and how it's played itself out over many decades, and most importantly ever since Reagan. It's kind of like the starting of this the abandonment of the working class in order to prop up the corporate, the billionaire class. And so that mantra is the operating philosophy of Democrats right now, and has been obviously for decades, ever since Reagan. And it's slowly played itself out over the decades. And unfortunately, I believe that the plague, the plight, I guess, maybe, of all our rural counties really started leading up to Clinton, where the Democrats passed NAFTA, and that created this momentum over the decades to follow of the globalization of the globe, of the capitalist market infrastructure for creating products, factory working, and that got moved off to countries where it is cheaper to pay people 10 cents an hour than it is to pay an American $12 an hour, or, you know, well, minimum wage, $7.50, whatever. But yeah, and so, you know, so yeah, rural counties all over the country actually used to be very, very union strong blue. Maine, there's examples of this all over the country. Even Oregon, Douglas County used to be a union county of timber workers, and slowly the all of our manufacturing has all gone away. And so what has been left is we have all these counties without jobs, and we have poverty. And so again, going to like the depth of all this, myself being a person, a passionate activist that has taken time to learn these philosophies, like this understanding of like political economy, feel like I have something to say, and I think it's valid and true. And unfortunately, I feel like there's this unspoken rule that the Democrats must be worshipped, and that they have done no wrong ever. And I think that is the reason. I'm not saying that Dems haven't done good things, but there's this lack of like acceptance of self-reflection that I think is actually a healthy thing to do. It's okay to be like, hey, you know what, I messed up. And that unfortunately, people like me, who I am a non-binary queer person of color, who daily endures levels of oppression that very comfortable white older people who are retired and who make up the majority of this party will never understand. And so I end up like expressing my views, and then I'm met with derision and contempt for trying to stand up for what to try to actually better things, because I am trying to actually correct the wrongs of decades of policy that has impoverished and is destroying the lives of so many people. And yeah, I guess I'm getting close to I think the ending of my little monologue. Thank you so much for listening. And that's kind of, yeah, it's just that I've heard so many speeches from so many candidates talking about how they keep wanting to prop up the person of color, the queer, and I'm that person. I'm that poor person. I check all the boxes, and then I try to stand up and being like, hey, I'm enduring the suffering that y'all are trying to like counteract, and here I am with my ideas, and then they're telling me that I need to be quiet and not say those things. And it's really funny. It's really interesting to see that virtue signaling over and over and over again from Dem candidates like that claim to care about people of color. And so I thank you for letting me unleash that. Thank you. Sorry, check. That's it.
Yeah, I recognize the frustration and what you're expressing there in terms of what you you are dealing with as an individual person, and the circumstances that you feel are or that you are encountering, and that are impacting you emotionally and circumstantially, and whether or not it empowers you or disempowers you. And I think, at the core of what I'm talking about, and again, this is big picture versus like little picture, and like how you fix things on a smaller scales of interpersonal communications and relationships. But the idea is to start with this idea of really providing more safer spaces for people to share their opinion, and for that opinion to not be outright rejected and swept aside, for the practice to be instituted in a systemic way, that that we're going to listen to people, we're going to try to incorporate their perspectives into the work we're doing, and we're going to do it with an idea that everybody's perspective and viewpoint should be considered a contribution, not a competition. And I think what happens is, when people's perspectives differ from our own, we can sometimes feel like our power is threatened, because it means that we're not going to get what we want. And the same thing obviously is true for other folks. If they see our perspective as somehow a threat, then they're gonna try to push back and oppose us, because they think that we're going to disempower them. And I think if we you can't just ask everybody to be better and to just do better. Not everybody knows how to do that, and how to do that quickly, especially if they feel threatened in some way by some other person or group for whatever reason, justifiably or not. And so the idea is that if we have to facilitate this, we have to practice it. We have to teach ourselves, relearn that we don't need to be just at each other's throats about our perspectives and our input, but to really provide space for it. Also, there are elections within our party, and sometimes we win, sometimes we don't win. But part of the thing that needs to happen is that there needs to be more collaboration between the people who are representing us, whether it's as delegates or serving in the standing committees or anything like that, as well as our elected officials, with the rest of us to make sure that they are bringing our viewpoints in to the work they're doing that they've been elected to represent us to do. And so I think it's important that we provide more spaces for people to share their ideas in a constructive way. Business meetings are not always conducive to that. One of the things I hope we can do is set up more events, almost like TEDx events, where people can, craft a message, maybe even a little short speech or something that can then be, delivered, and we can hear an idea, something creative. How can we work together on for supporting rural candidates? How can we empower younger, queer, individuals of color and communities as well within the work we do? Really hearing those ideas out. It's very difficult to facilitate those kinds of conversations through the structures we typically are working through. So trying to provide more spaces like this. I'd love to have these kinds of conversations throughout the year, where we can, maybe pick a topic and, we're talking urban rural right now. Okay, we're talking about empowering youth. Okay, we're talking about reaching communities that are the hardest to reach or don't have confidence that we are going to, advocate for their needs. All those kinds of things. I think we should, really think about how we can pull those kinds of ideas together. I really like it better when I'm hearing your voices. I'm sorry if anybody doesn't want to talk, that's fine. But I do want to make sure that we cover everything. Christian, did you want to speak to your question about like vertical and horizontal?
Sure. My question specifically is like, what is your goal as chair when elected? Are you seeing yourself more, and I think you've kind of touched on this, are you seeing yourself more directing the meeting, or are you facilitating? And what is your feelings on a top-down structure versus a horizontal structure?
This is great. The horizontal versus vertical, in terms of power dynamics and structures, something I've actually given a lot of consideration to. I'm definitely more of a horizontal structure kind of person. I want to, the role of the chair is to facilitate the things in the party, right? All the actions in the party. In white supremacy culture, there's a great website from Standing Up for Racial Justice, and one of their pages is about white supremacy culture and the characteristics of it in organizations. And I've actually posted some of that in the Just Us Delegates Facebook page. Really informative and really interesting. It lists a bunch of the challenges and problems that come with that kind of culture, and whether it's white supremacy culture or just supremacy culture, that competition kind of element of like people trying to vie for supremacy against each other instead of working collaboratively. It also provides antidotes, like solutions that we can try to implement. And I've really tried to incorporate those kinds of perspectives and trying to resolve some of those challenges in the proposals that I've collected from people across the state. My intention is one of the things in there is that the people who typically get credit, even if they're not really that responsible for successes, right? As a chair, one of the things I want to do is recognize that I'm not always going to be chair, and the leaders that we currently have in whatever position aren't always going to be in those positions either. And we need to train people up. We need to not just train them up, but give them the confidence and the support to develop and and grow as individuals, and to be ready to step into those kinds of roles when we need it. And that takes a more horizontal mentality, the idea that we're really planning for successorship. And by that, I mean, we're planning for success by planning for our successors, really bringing people up and not just picking, not just saying, oh, I tap you, and you to be our next. No, like really doing the work to make sure people have the skills they need, provide more training. Obviously, you got to work through all the logistics of providing that, but as a goal, something to strive for, to try to connect people with people who have the skills that you want to learn. And I think if we do that, we share power. we share power in a constructive way, not in a chaotic way. And one of the things I want to do as chair is recognize, more than recognize people who are the real reasons for success. Because if I'm facilitating, I may have some credit due to me for helping it happen, but I'm not really the one actually doing all the hard work anyway. It's really the SEC, the county parties, the PCPs, the volunteers. They're the real people who do all the work. And so, I've played sports, and I really appreciate this notion that when you lose, when you struggle, it's my fault. But when we succeed, it's everybody else's contributions that cause that. I'm just a team player. I think that kind of approach needs to, really can build this idea that I'm going to go to bat for you when we're struggling, but I'm going to support you when we're succeeding. I'm going to make it easier for you to do the work to, let's say somebody messes up. Okay, we need to make sure we provide the support for them so they can, do better and be better. I know the Rural Caucus had a very challenging meeting. Instead of saying, oh, they messed up, or okay, what training do we need to provide? What support do we need to provide? What best practices can we share across all the different meetings that we have and all the skills that have been collected, so that the people who we elevate into positions of authority within our structures have all the skills they need so they can better serve us and the party and the communities we're trying to represent and help. So very important. I see some other folks who I haven't seen questions from yet. Jennifer, Holly and Charles, Doyle Canning. Do you all have questions or suggestions you want to contribute? And I'd love to hear your voices if you're comfortable doing that. And Ruth, I'd love to hear from Ruth as well.
I'll just say hi.
Hi, Jennifer. Do you have a question or anything at all? Or an insight? No. Okay.
Hey, John, this is Charles.
Hi, Charles.
I just want to say, so far, I really appreciate your point of views and, really kind of putting out there that it's not about you. I think that says a lot. The one question I have, and you sort of touched on it a little bit earlier, is, we've seen a lot of hostility within the party, a lot of, and I understand, people get emotional because that's why they're involved, but we've seen hostility to the point where it's really kind of almost combative. It's really, in person, I've seen people call people names and almost get up like they're going to hit somebody. Do you have any plans on how to address that? How to make people feel heard and maybe understood that they're not alone, but that's not a course of action?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there are a lot of places to set that kind of expectation, that kind of tone. Obviously between being elected and the second quarter meeting, there's a lot of time there to try to do work, to try to build this kind of tone and put this in place, but not a lot of time in front of everybody. So some of that's going to be messaging, making sure I convey, hey, it's time for a collaborative future. It's time for us to come together and respect our viewpoints and start to send those messages out to the delegates. Hopefully, in the appointment process for those standing committees, we can do the same thing, set that tone and say, you know what, we're going to have a diverse array of people in these positions so that we can actually facilitate this kind of collaboration, at least in those standing committees, and in a way that then brings in the collaboration from everybody else that really does it in a structured way. But obviously we're going to be in meetings, we're going to be online, we're going to have people get fired up and bring their emotions out, and not always in constructive ways. And again, I've been at meetings where people have cursed at someone or insulted them. Obviously that's inappropriate for the work we're trying to do. As a chair, again, I don't want to pick sides on one person or another. The key is that we have to come together, but it's going to take setting the tone at the beginning. It's going to take a long time to really resolve some of these frustrations. And it's going to take reminding. So at the beginning of every meeting, the chair gets to share a few remarks. And I've already thought through that one of the things I want to emphasize is that we're here to work together. We're here to be collaborative and constructive in our commentary. First of all, I encourage everyone to keep that focus, that we are here to share our ideas, to come up with mutually agreeable and mutually beneficial solutions that are in the interest of serving the communities that either we represent or that are underrepresented in the SEC. We got to keep that in mind too, that we're trying to represent people who maybe not, who aren't there. And the idea, if we can focus our attention on the work that we're trying to do for other people, as well as the idea that we can't do that work if we don't trust each other and don't respect each other, then obviously we're going to have a tough time, pushing back against timber unity and Republicans, not just in 2 years, but in 4 years and 8 years. And it hasn't been that long since we got a majority in the Senate, much less super majority. So there's always potential for us to struggle, and that's why in the video I say our party is at risk. There's always that potential for a pendulum swing, and that pendulum swing is a result of work. The Republican Party and Timber Unity are working, and so keeping that in mind, as well as the fact that mutual respect is what we want from everybody else. So let's show them how we do it. If we can practice it internally, we can share it out with the rest of the state and the rest of the communities we're trying to reach. But obviously, when there are conflicts, there's going to be other things that we need to do. Like, I don't mind saying, you and you, let's sit down and have a conversation. I'll sit there, I'll moderate, I'll facilitate. Let's solve some of these conflicts. I don't mind stepping into that, and bringing other people in, people who are more skilled at that than me, people who have like conflict resolution skills, and finding those people. It doesn't have to be me, but I don't mind bringing that kind of interaction together to really say we value both of you or all of you. Let's work through this. Let's see, who else has a question? Doyle, did you have any questions that you wanted to bring up?
Yes, we're not muted. Everyone be quiet. Hi, good evening. Thank you so much for inviting me to come tonight and say hello. It's great to meet you. I've been hearing a lot about your campaign. People have been reaching out to me, messaging me. Oh, yeah? And so I, wanted to just meet you personally or in Zoom anyway. And I really like what you're, bringing in terms of a vision of a more collaborative and a more supportive kind of culture of the DPO. I think that's really positive, and certainly could use we could use some leadership there. So I really appreciate that. In terms of the kind of more political side of it, I guess, despite the vision that you have of kind of bringing people together, there are different political tendencies and factions. It is in fact a coalition, the Democratic Party. So you spoke a little bit about your efforts around Jordan Cove, which I would like to learn more about. But I think what I'm wondering is, what is your political vision, or how would you characterize what you see as the future of the Democratic Party of Oregon? Where are we headed? What's your political vision? Yeah. Thanks.
That's a great question. And I know that early on there was a question about, and Joel asked this about, would I wholeheartedly speak in support of a candidate that maybe is in a district where I don't agree with them entirely on political perspectives. And as the chair, as an elected representative of the entire State Central Committee, obviously that my responsibility would be to take direction from the SEC on a lot of those kinds of approaches. I've worked on the Platform Resolution Committee. I've tried to put in work in terms of creative economic and environmental type shifts to the platform to really try to serve more people and to kind of shift our economic system, our infrastructure system, our energy infrastructure system, those kinds of things, into a more 21st century kind of mentality, renewable energy infrastructure, which is that legislative action item that we ended up writing together, is all about replacing that non-renewable energy infrastructure with renewable, but using trying to make that just transition mentality of not replace, of like not displacing, workers, but to provide retrain to hire programs, publicly funded, paid at union scale, so they can afford to take those, training programs. And then when they're done with those training programs, be eligible to do the work, whether it's the construction, maintenance, or operations of clean energy infrastructure programs and projects that the state is doing the work to encourage and to facilitate. Obviously, getting that through the legislature is a different question. But in terms of vision, obviously, hopefully the kind of person that I am has come out tonight. But when it comes to empowering people and empowering community, we have to look at things in an intersectional way. We have to understand that climate justice is racial justice, is a question of economic class, is a question of housing security, is a question of water and other infrastructure. All those things come together, and the ability for equity, I think of it as the ability for all of us to have the resources we need, not just to survive, but to thrive and to fully participate in the society that we live in. And obviously, again, it's a destination that we may never reach perfectly at any given time, but it's something that we continue to strive for. And if our work is focused on that and centered on that, I think that our political agenda, our legislative agenda, as well as the people that end up running for office for us, will continue to move in that kind of direction, because we're ever evolving as a party, as a people, as a culture. Our perspectives are more progressive now than they were, say, 50, 100, however many hundreds of years ago. The goal is to keep that moving. And, I think that's what progressive kind of means. But, it also means that we have to search for ideas. We don't have to come up with all the solutions ourselves. There are organizations and advocates out there who are creating ideas, whether it's about the environment and infrastructure and education, or doing the work to support communities that are left out economically, politically, socially, as well as doing that work to build a better economy that actually serves more people, a more solidarity-oriented economy. These are all things that I care about. But again, as chair, I'm not going to go into the Platform Resolutions Committee and say, put this in there. I'm happy to have a conversation with people about what my political perspectives are and that kind of thing. But at the same time, acting as chair, as the spokesperson for the party, I want to make sure that, I'm able to speak for everyone by not, misrepresenting people as well. So again, it's a fine line probably to walk, finer than I maybe anticipate at this point, but it's something that is going to take conversations with everybody, and really making sure that the party is welcoming, and that in that welcoming action we don't give up our values, but we breathe life into them by saying we're going to come to these solutions together. We're going to practice democracy, and in the party and outside, right? So hopefully that's a satisfactory answer for you, Doyle. I appreciate the question. Were you going to chime in there, Doyle? I saw your.
Sorry, my phone died in the middle of you answering my question.
Oh no! Well, there is recording.
So I'm back on my computer. I'm sorry about that. And I heard the first part and the last part, but I missed the middle. But I would very much like to talk with you, and please reach out, and we could discuss more. Thank you.
Okay, feel free to. Do you have my Facebook page or the numbers that are on the website to shoot me a text? I'd be glad to talk with you later.
Okay, sure. Yeah.
All right. I'm looking at the time at 7:14. We've been having a good, robust conversation, but obviously, if people are wanting to get on to dinner and that kind of thing, we can work toward wrapping up. But if you all want to talk some more, I'm open to it. I also want to see if there are any questions you all have for each other. I know that you've asked me a lot of questions, and I would also like to turn it back and say, what are your ideas? What are your solutions? I want to hear from you. Like, what are your solutions for the things that we've talked about? And like Mark, what's your idea for how we serve Umatilla and CD2? Like, Ruth, what's your idea about serving tribal nations and that kind of thing? So I think now is a good time to kind of open up and get your perspectives a little bit. not all at once. All right, Ruth.
Um, well, kind of following up on what you said about being welcoming, part of being welcoming is starting with how welcoming are we now? And so coming from my HR background, um, part of knowing that will be having people uh, having a robust system for reporting to you so that you can know what's going on in the counties. So that if someone is disrespected or discounted, I also know that you said yesterday, I think, about bringing in experts around diversity, inclusion, and equity. So
Right.
I guess this is more of a comment.
Yeah.
But it's about figuring out just how welcoming are we across the whole state, which is it's a huge question. So if you'd like to comment on that, and with regard to how are you going to know how welcoming it is? What kind of robust reporting system can you put in place so that if somebody is disrespected in a county, whether it's Multnomah or any of the other, 35 counties, how does that get back to you? And what kind of systems can be put in place so that we can be elevating the whole sense of welcoming others?
Yeah, that's a great point. I think that I don't want to go too long on that just because I want to hear some other folks. But yeah, if you want to watch the video from last night when we get that put up, I do touch on that. But I'm not a diversity, equity, and inclusion expert. But we have people in the party who have that some level of expertise there, as well as the idea that to really facilitate an organization and a group to try to put that into a more of a framework and a model, like something that we can practice with steps and clear guidelines for how to do that. It's going to take bringing in professionals who know how to do that work to facilitate groups of various sizes to help us achieve that and to develop that model. One of the proposals in the list on the website, touch on that. So definitely want to recognize that I don't have all the skills that we need for the party to be successful, and I'm not going to try. What I'm going to say is we have that within the party and within our networks, and we have that within connections that we can form that are new. We want to be, anytime we hire somebody, we want to make sure we're not just picking our friends. So, I mean, I know diversity and equity and inclusion professionals, and other people do too. So that process needs to be something that's, careful and we set clear guidelines and standards and make a good ethical choice on who we bring on to do that kind of work. But again, it's how do we know that we're doing well? It needs to be built into that model, right? One of the things I want to do is make sure there's a clear and open way of communicating with me, whether it's about the struggles and frustrations or the suggestions for success and proposals that we might want to consider. Set that up, not just so it goes to me, but so that we can, have conversations about things. But again, it's the kind of thing that needs to be built. It's infrastructure. We're a party that likes infrastructure investments, whether it's water or broadband or transportation. We need to respect the idea that that's hard work. There's a reason it hasn't been built or maintained as well as we'd like, because people are hesitant to do that kind of work and spend the time on it. But it's infrastructure for ourselves within the party, and if we do that, we're going to set ourselves up to be much more successful as a whole as well as individuals. I know there's other questions in here. I feel like I've missed something from Yvette. Is it possible? First of all, I want to just check in. Are people okay with staying on for a little while longer?
I'm actually going to hop off.
Okay.
So thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Ruth.
Thank you for running. Thank you for running.
And I do want to touch on Yvette's question. Is it possible to change the voting process for DPO chair so that more people vote? For example, bringing PCPs in. I like the idea of trying to involve more people in decisions that we make, either through input or otherwise. One of the key parts of that is state law. State law does limit who can vote for the chair to the delegates that have been elected. In fact, the state law currently reads that it's the delegates elected from county parties. Right now we also have delegates that come from other sources, whether it's from CD or congressional district committees, as well as caucuses. I know there's a bill working through the legislature to try to, account for that. But at the same time, again, that shows us that the law can change. And so, there's I think it's interesting to, entertain any number of ideas to make sure that the Democratic Party engages in as much democracy as possible. There are things to consider there, though, like if we open it to all the PCPs, how much more campaigning is going to be required? How much more money is going to have to be spent by candidates? Right now, we're doing everything as from a volunteer basis. But people who have the funds to be able to reach all the PCPs across the state, brings in all those kinds of questions, and those are more logistical necessarily than say whether or not we want to practice better democracy. It's more like, okay, we want to practice more democracy, so how do we tackle the logistical challenges? Not to make it be the other way around where, it's too logistically challenging, let's not practice it. Really trying to apply that as much as possible into the work that we are doing. So I like the kind of values idea behind that question. Again, it's a question of how we want to address those kinds of concerns. But it's definitely a great question that I think is worth asking. Joel Barker said, Christian, what happened in Multnomah County Dem 6 or so years ago? I don't know what that means. And Joel also said the work of coming together is right here. So hopefully that means that he felt like this was a collaborative environment that we were creating here. I know he stepped off, but let's see. Anything else that we want to touch on while we're here?
What is your plan to win?
Yeah, I saw that. Plan to win. First of all the kind of outreach that we're doing, things like this, as well as presence on Facebook and sending the emails through the listserv that we only got access to on Friday, because that's how the system works. We get access to a listserv for emails 2 weeks before the election, to try to reach everyone by email. Before that, a week before that, we got everybody's phone numbers and their mailing addresses. Do we have the funds to send a mailer out 3 weeks before an election? No. Do I have the time as a person who's currently working, who would, of course, I would leave my job so I could be a full-time chair, to call every single person as fast as I possibly can? Sadly, no. And so my effort is to try to reach everybody in all those methods that I just listed, whether it's online and Facebook and things like that, emails, trying to call every single delegate, as well as hoping that you all will share the word, and pass things around, whether it's that video, whether it's the video of this meeting, whether it's the the messages that you're inspired by, and reach out to the delegates that whether it's in your county or in other counties, and really try to build the enthusiasm for this idea of collaboration and respecting each other's perspectives and participation. Oh, I think you're muted.
All right. Are you going to call through the list, or you're not going to?
I'm calling through the list. That's where a lot of my proposals have come from already, calling people. I had some numbers, and I got some numbers before we got access to the list, and worked through a lot of those as well. But it's like 170 some or so delegates, plus alternates. And so trying to make those calls, one after the other.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
I had a question specifically on what is your thoughts and opinions on the NAV voter issue, where we have almost, I think the second largest voting block right now is NAV voters in Oregon, and a lot of them are youth who are more or less disenfranchised. And just one story is I had a Doyle Canning sign behind me at a flagel dinner for Douglas County, and the senator, I guess the lead senator, was attending and saw that and started going on a whole spiel about Green Party and how we really need to vote for DeFazio, as if I wasn't voting for DeFazio. And it was kind of like insulting that to just assume something. And I feel like I've talked to quite a bit of youth who have felt that way, where they kind of feel pressured, even though they most likely will vote Democrat at the general election because they can in the primaries, but they feel kind of like you have to, or you're just like, you don't know what you're talking about.
Wait, I'm
Yeah.
confused. They thought I was running as a green? Like,
I think they assumed members that were, or supporters of you, were going to vote Green instead of for DeFazio, even though you endorsed him.
Yeah. Obviously,
all about expanding the coalition.
Right.
this is huge, right? Because the
There's-
idea of having different opinions about who we're supporting in primaries and all of those kinds of things, and various assumptions. There are a lot of real and perceived situations within the party, right? And so, like you're talking about reaching younger voters, especially when they're non-affiliated voters. Some of it's messaging, some of it's connecting with community. One of the things I hope we can do is do more community-oriented activities, service events, connecting with community. Obviously, it's hard to say like connect with schools when in a place where, the school board is Republican and they don't want to allow Democrats to connect with their students. Those kinds of things can be pretty challenging. Again, I'm going to turn that question back to the communities where you all live, and say same thing with rural communities or BIPOC communities. What do you think will work? Give me the solutions. Give us the answers. There's this whole idea of trying to reach non-affiliated voters. It's very complex because it's different in different parts of the state. And so really saying, okay, let's put together all the ideas that we can gather, and then, really kind of structure more of a plan about, okay, what are we going to apply here versus there versus, in different places. And again, it is, going to be a lot of outreach to younger voters, but it's also going to include, trying to connect with those people who have left the Republican Party and are now NAVs. They're not all going to be Democratic leaning in the end, but finding ways to reframe various progressive messages to really start shifting that narrative, and that takes communication skills, and so we need to make sure we elevate those folks. People who work in communications, whether it's the traditional methods or using alternative media options, whether it's social media or anything else that comes along. So
Oh, go ahead, Doyle.
Well, I mean, I think this question is really at the heart of what I was getting at, of like, what is the future of our party? And if we're not reaching out to younger voters, then there is no future,
that's
right?
absolutely true.
Like, it's just math. So, my campaign spent a significant amount of resources registering NAVs as Democrats. That's work that the state party should be invested in, but hasn't historically been. And in my congressional district, that skews younger voters who are, students in Eugene and Corvallis who were registered motor voter and who are very progressive and who want to vote in primaries and want to be involved in political change. But currently, like, there's that barrier. And it was really challenging, and a place where the party should be putting more resources and energy. It's not rocket science. It just takes resources.
It does.
And, there's been a resistance to prioritizing that because it will bring new voters in and change dynamics, change power dynamics. So, this is at the heart of kind of a lot of questions that I was trying to get at with my question of like, what's your vision of the future of our party, and what is your analysis of some of those power dynamics and how they play out and how resources are allocated. So I'm really glad that this came up. I mean, I think it's really, there's a big dynamic in the party of a lot of the power, most of the power, if not all of the power, being centered around Portland, and all the shot calling happening there, and people making a lot of assumptions about like what our counties need, what Douglas County and Coos County and Josephine County and even Lane County should be doing. And it's our rural counties that are reaching out to NAVs. It's our rural counties that are taking the strongest stance against Jordan Cove. It's our rural counties that have some of the most progressive activists at the grassroots level. And there's this assumption that because these are red or even purple counties, somehow they're more conservative. And that's actually not true. And so we feel like we're constantly battling this kind of narrative, then having to sort of correct the record that like our movement is really strong, and is very strong on the environmental justice, for example, with Jordan Cove being kind of the preeminent issue, but forestry issues really being paramount for a lot of folks who are living in rural communities, and our lives in communities are defined by an extractive industry that is harmful. And so I don't know where I'm going with this, but I think, I'm really glad that this came up. I really appreciate the leadership of Christian and Jaden, Josephine County Democrats, Douglas County, like people are putting in the work, and it's not easy, and it's under-resourced. And I would love to see, leadership at the state level that really recognizes that.
Yeah, great points. And I've talked to Jaden and Christian a bit about their opinions about how to, deal with the timber related tax and things like that, and trying to really, push back on those conservative narratives. It's that same concept I said earlier about leaving, places left for red. There are a lot of ways that we can push back on these narratives in ways that aren't alienating, but that are inviting. And again, it's the same kind of thing. We need to make the Democratic Party of Oregon a place where people feel comfortable and want to stay. Whether it's activists within the party all the way up to the, state central committee level, or whether it's, just our volunteers and the people who are doing voter registration drives and all those kinds of outreach efforts. You're right, though. If we don't bring in the young people, then there's no future of the party. And that's inherently true. And so the work has to be focused on what their needs are. School boards, students need to see that we are actively trying to support their needs in schools. Up in David Douglas School District in East Portland, the school board was mostly conservative until there was a concerted effort to get Democratic and progressive women into those positions, who, one of their first things, simple thing, right, is saying, we're going to bring reproductive health, services and items into the school so that we provide that kind of support for our younger women in those settings who, may not have the financial support and economic stability to always have the resources that they need. And so making sure that, simple things like that, is just making those steps to show younger people that we actually care about them, isn't going to work if we don't challenge for those positions. Isn't going to work if we don't talk to them about what they can advocate for, and providing opportunities for them to advocate for themselves. Do you need something in your community? Okay, how do we facilitate them being the voices who are leading that charge? We've seen it all over the country where people, young people, are being lifted up to speak out about issues, whether it's Greta Thunberg or the students from school shootings. We need to say it's okay for other people to be front and center, but at the same time we need to make sure they know that we are going to support and protect them when people either express some backlash or that kind of thing. So and we've got a lot of younger people who have run for like nonpartisan office, whether it's Medford or Talent and people there, but also there are candidates who have strived and not won in the end. And, we need to bring people like you, Doyle, together so that we can learn all the lessons from those experiences and say, how can we support other candidates? How can we support our communities? How can we bring younger people into those campaign efforts and empower them by giving them the skills about how to be a supportive member of a campaign? All those kinds of things to build relationships, build community. I think that that's an important part of it as well. But it's not just positions of power; it's positions of respect and making sure that people know that we have their interests not only in mind, but in putting it into effect through action. And how we do that, obviously, is we got to prioritize, we got to organize, and put those ideas together. As a party, you can't, as a chair, you can't just unilaterally make a decision. We're going to do this. You got to work in collaboration with the structures that already exist, with the staff and the work that they're doing. And the State Central Committee needs to, that's why I'm proposing special committees to create recommendations for various aspects of the work we do. Those recommendations then go to the SEC. The SEC decides whether to approve them, and then it turns into action. We need to be deliberate about those things, not just, we have to hurry, urgent, urgent, urgent. But we do need to recognize the urgency of the political moment and realize that, if we wait too long, if we hesitate, we're going to be in trouble. It's 7:36, and I appreciate you all being here. I feel like it's probably a good spot to wrap things up. I'm so appreciative that you all came, and obviously everybody else who was on earlier. We want to keep these kinds of events going, and as chair, I promise you we'll have more like this to help us share ideas and talk about these kinds of things. And I think it'd be really exciting to see what comes out of, more structure to it and more, more of a program behind these kinds of conversations. So thank you so much. I know there are questions in the chat that I maybe didn't get to, but feel free to email to John at johnharrisknight.com. You can go to the website and check it out there. You can go to our Facebook page and look up any future events we have. Really glad that you all were able to come.
I wanted to ask too, before we close out the meeting, we've gotten so much feedback like this, so many concerns from delegates and Democrats around the state about issues that have to do with rural and recruiting NAVs and supporting labor and talking about solutions for how we can move forward with dealing with timber unity. So I was thinking about suggesting setting up a call that had to do with mainly only those things, and then that way we could bring in Jaden and Christian and Doyle and people who have been affected directly by that, so we could all get together and talk about it. So I see support for that from you, Christian. I think we should find a spot on the calendar to do that. Don't you, John?
Yeah, I'm looking at the calendar right now, and obviously I have a work schedule to work around, as well.
There's not a ton of space.
Other events and things, but finding another opportunity to have one of these, I think, is one or two more of these. I think would be great if we can pull it off.
I would definitely agree. I think that's a really good idea, and I think the community here would actually really appreciate it.
Okay.
Great. Well, thank you all for coming again. Sorry,
Yeah.
I didn't mean to cut you off, John.
No, it's okay. I just want to say thank you again, everybody. We'll call it a night. Enjoy the rest of your evening. See you online, and at the latest, we'll see you on the 20th.
Drop us a line.
Yep.
Have a good one.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.